I woke up early like any normal day. The sun was barely up when I stepped outside to head to work. But what I saw in my driveway made my heart stop. My car, my pride and joy, was covered in thick gray cement. Not just splashed on the windows or dumped on the hood. No, this was methodical. Someone had poured cement all over my vehicle, hardening around the tires, coating the doors, even filling the exhaust pipe. What the? I couldn't even finish my sentence. My hands shook as I circled the car. This wasn't just vandalism. This was personal. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I'm a deputy sheriff, and this wasn't just my personal car. I sometimes used it for work. Who would do this? And why? I sprinted back to my house, nearly tripping on the steps. My security cameras. I had installed them after moving to Oak Ridge Estates because something about this neighborhood never felt right. My fingers trembled as I pulled up the footage from last night. The screen flickered to life, showing my driveway at 2:13 a.m. 3 figures moved into view, carrying buckets. What I saw next didn't just shock me, it would change everything in Oak Ridge Estates forever. Before we start the story, please comment down from which country you are watching, like the video, and don't forget to subscribe. I'd only moved to Oak Ridge Estates 3 months ago, seeking peace after years in the noisy downtown apartment. The neighborhood looked perfect: neat lawns, friendly neighbors, and quiet streets. What the real estate agent conveniently left out was the iron grip of our homeowners association. Margaret Wilson, the HOA president, ran this community like her personal kingdom. A retired school principal with too much time on her hands, she patrolled the streets daily with her clipboard and rulebook. From my first week, I found violation notices taped to my door. My mailbox was non-regulation height. My garbage bins remained visible from the street for 30 minutes too long. I received a $50 fine because my grass grew a 1/4 inch above the 3-inch maximum. Nobody knew I worked as a deputy sheriff. I purposely kept my profession private, wanting separation between my work and home life. I always parked my patrol car at the station and drove my personal vehicle home. Last week's HOA meeting was the breaking point. When I questioned the new decorative rock policy, Margaret pointed me out to everyone, her voice sharp with authority. Some newer residents need to learn our community standards or face consequences. The room fell uncomfortably silent. I never imagined her consequences would escalate to destroying my property. As the security footage played, I held my breath. 3 shadowy figures appeared on screen at exactly 2:13 a.m., moving cautiously toward my driveway. They carried large buckets and what looked like tools. The motion-activated lights I'd installed caught them perfectly. When they stepped fully into the light, I nearly dropped my coffee mug. "Impossible," I whispered, but the evidence was undeniable. There was Margaret Wilson in her signature red cardigan, the same one she wore while measuring people's grass height. Beside her stood Tom Jenkins, the HOA treasurer who always backed her decisions. The third figure was Barbara Collins, Margaret's neighbor and self-appointed compliance officer. I watched in stunned silence as they methodically worked around my car. Tom mixed the quick-drying cement in buckets while Margaret directed operations with the same authoritative pointing she used during HOA meetings. Barbara kept lookout, nervously checking up and down the street. The most chilling moment came when Margaret paused at my windshield. She pointed directly at something inside, my sheriff's department parking pass that had slipped partway out of the glove compartment. She actually smiled, nodding to the others. They knew exactly whose car they were targeting. For 23 minutes, they poured bucket after bucket of cement over my vehicle. They were thorough, coating the wheels, doors, and windows with precision. Before leaving, Margaret took photos with her phone, likely as trophy evidence. My phone rang, startling me out of my shocked trance. It was Sergeant Davis, wondering why I hadn't shown up for morning briefing. "Sorry, sir," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Someone poured cement all over my car overnight. I can't get it to start." A brief silence followed. "Cement? Like actual cement?" "Yes, sir. Hardened completely. And I have it all on security footage." "Who would do something like that?" he asked. I watched through my living room window as Margaret appeared at the end of the street, clipboard in hand, making her morning inspection rounds. She was heading straight toward my house, probably coming to admire her handiwork. "I think I know exactly who did it," I replied. "And she's about to get a very unpleasant surprise." "Sit tight," Sergeant Davis said firmly. "I'm sending units your way now." I stepped outside just as Margaret reached my driveway. Her practiced look of shock was almost comical. "Oh my goodness," she gasped, hand dramatically covering her mouth. "What happened to your car?" I remained silent, watching her performance. She circled my cement-covered vehicle, shaking her head with fake concern. "This is terrible," Margaret continued, scribbling on her clipboard. "Unfortunately, Section 8.3 of our covenant prohibits storing construction materials in driveways. I'll have to issue a violation notice." "Construction materials?" I finally spoke. "The cement," she clarified, gesturing to my ruined car. "Probably those teenagers from Pine Ridge Development. They're always causing trouble." Margaret handed me a pink violation slip. "You'll need to clear this situation within 48 hours. Otherwise, it's a $100 daily fine." I took the paper without a word, which seemed to unnerve her. She was expecting an argument, anything but this calm. "I already know who did this, Margaret," I said quietly. She stiffened slightly but recovered quickly. "Well, if you have information, you should report it to the authorities." "I already have." I nodded toward my house. My security cameras caught everything. All 23 minutes of it. The color drained from Margaret's face. Her clipboard lowered slightly. "I don't know what you're implying, but—" The sound of approaching sirens cut her off. 2 police cruisers turned into our street, followed by an unmarked car I recognized as Detective Wilson's. "That was fast," I remarked. Margaret's composure cracked. "I should get going. I have many properties to inspect this morning." "You'll want to stay," I suggested as the vehicles pulled up. "They'll have questions for you." Sergeant Davis was first out of his car. He surveyed my cement-covered vehicle and whistled low. "Deputy?" He greeted me with a nod. Margaret's eyes widened at the title. "Deputy?" "Margaret, this is my boss, Sergeant Davis," I explained calmly. "I work for the sheriff's department." Her face went from pale to ashen. "You're a police officer? But you never said." "Sheriff's deputy," I corrected. "And you just vandalized a law enforcement officer's vehicle. That's a felony." Detective Wilson approached with a tablet. "Is this your security footage?" she asked, showing the screen with clear images of Margaret and her accomplices. Margaret's clipboard clattered to the ground. In the distance, I noticed neighbors emerging from their homes, curious about the police presence. "I think," Sergeant Davis said, "we need to have a conversation down at the station." "This is ridiculous," Margaret sputtered as Detective Wilson read her rights. "There must be some mistake with that footage." My neighbors had gathered on their lawns now, watching the spectacle unfold. Mrs. Jenkins from across the street was recording everything on her phone. Mr. Patterson, whose Christmas decorations Margaret had forced him to take down in January, didn't even try to hide his smile. "We'll need to bring in your associates as well," Sergeant Davis told Margaret as he escorted her toward his cruiser. "Tom Jenkins and Barbara Collins, correct?" Margaret's eyes widened. "How did you—" "Clear as day on the security footage," I explained. "The same cameras you called unapproved exterior modifications last month and tried to make me remove." As if on cue, Tom Jenkins appeared at the end of the street, walking his dog. He froze when he saw the police cars. When our eyes met, he immediately turned and tried to casually stroll away. "That's him," I pointed out. "The man with the poodle trying to escape." An officer quickly intercepted Tom, who immediately started talking. "It was all Margaret's idea. I just held the buckets. Barbara mixed the cement." Within 30 minutes, all 3 HOA board members were sitting in separate police cars. Barbara had been found hiding in her garden shed, still wearing the same clothes from the security footage. Detective Wilson examined my car more closely. "This is professional-grade quick-setting cement. Premeditated and planned." She whistled. "They really went all out." "Can it be removed?" I asked. "Not without destroying the car," she replied. "We'll document everything for evidence, but I'm afraid your insurance company will be declaring this a total loss." I nodded, still processing the reality of the situation. My car was destroyed, but somehow watching Margaret being driven away in handcuffs made it slightly more bearable. Mrs. Peterson, the elderly woman whose flower choices Margaret had criticized for years, approached me cautiously. "Is it true? Did Margaret really do this to your car?" "Security footage doesn't lie," I replied. She shook her head. "All because you questioned her at the meeting?" "That, and she just found out I'm a sheriff's deputy." Mrs. Peterson's eyes lit up. "You're in law enforcement?" "Oh my." Margaret picked the wrong person to bully. As more neighbors gathered, I began to hear their stories. Years of petty fines, threats, and intimidation. Margaret had been terrorizing Oak Ridge Estates long before I arrived. While my car was destroyed, the neighborhood was experiencing something new: freedom. Detective Wilson approached with her notepad. We'll need your full statement down at the station. The sheriff's department meeting room felt strange from the other side of the table. Usually, I sat where Detective Wilson now sat, questioning suspects and taking statements. Today I was the victim. Start from the beginning, Detective Wilson said, recorder running. Any prior incidents with Ms. Wilson or the HOA board? For the next hour, I detailed every interaction since moving to Oak Ridge Estates. The violation notices, the escalating fines, the public humiliation at HOA meetings. As I spoke, Officer Ramirez photographed the dozens of citations Margaret had left on my door. This is harassment, Detective Wilson concluded, flipping through the stack. Look at these dates, sometimes 3 notices in a single day. Sheriff Bronson entered the room, his expression serious. The district attorney wants to talk to you, he told me. This case just got bigger. District Attorney Choi was a no-nonsense woman I'd testified for in several cases. She didn't waste time. We executed a search warrant on Margaret Wilson's home, she explained. Found HOA financial records that shouldn't have been there. Looks like she's been skimming from community funds for years. How much? I asked. Initial estimate? About $95,000. She's been funneling violation fees into her personal account instead of the HOA treasury. That explained the endless violations and aggressive fee collection. Margaret wasn't just a power-hungry tyrant, she was a thief. We also found a detailed list of residents with what she called compliance issues, Choi continued. Your name was circled with notes about making an example of you. This cement stunt wasn't random, it was targeted intimidation. Meanwhile, the 3 suspects were processed separately. Tom Jenkins broke immediately, offering a full confession in exchange for leniency. Barbara Collins maintained she was just following Margaret's instructions. Margaret herself refused to speak without her attorney present. By afternoon, my cement-covered car had been towed to the evidence garage. Insurance adjusters confirmed what I already knew, the vehicle was a total loss. When I finally returned home that evening, Oak Ridge Estates felt different. Neighbors who had never spoken to me were leaving casseroles on my porch. Mrs. Jenkins organized a carpool to help me get to work until my insurance came through. Mr. Patterson invited me to a hastily organized community meeting at his house. 27 residents crowded into Patterson's living room. People shared stories of Margaret's reign of terror, fines for unapproved bird feeders, threats over paint colors, even someone who sold their home at a loss just to escape her tyranny. The HOA bylaws state that if board members are unable to serve, emergency elections must be held, explained Patterson, who'd apparently studied the covenant. With all 3 board members facing criminal charges, we need new leadership. The community voted unanimously to form an interim board. To my surprise, they nominated me to serve as an advisor. You have law enforcement experience, Mrs. Peterson explained. You understand rules that are fair versus rules that are just controlling. I agreed to help with one condition. The first order of business has to be rewriting those ridiculous HOA regulations. The room erupted in applause. As I looked around at my neighbors, really seeing them as individuals for the first time, I realized something unexpected had happened. Margaret's cement revenge had destroyed my car, but it had freed an entire community. The county courthouse bustled with activity 6 weeks later. I straightened my tie in the bathroom mirror, preparing to testify. The sight of myself in formal attire rather than my deputy uniform felt strange, but today I was here as a victim, not an officer. News of the cement car case had spread beyond our community. Local media dubbed it concrete justice, with reporters camped outside the courthouse. The story hit a nerve with anyone who'd ever dealt with HOA troubles. The district attorney had offered Margaret a plea deal, but she refused, convinced she could charm the jury. Tom and Barbara had both accepted lesser charges in exchange for testifying against her. Today was the culmination of their poor decisions that night 3 months ago. I entered the courtroom to find it packed with Oak Ridge Estates residents. Mrs. Peterson waved from the front row. Even Mr. Collins sat there, having separated from Barbara after her arrest. The community had rallied around this case like nothing I'd ever seen. Margaret sat beside her expensive attorney, wearing a conservative blue dress that couldn't hide her scowl. She refused to meet my eyes as I walked past. When called to testify, I recounted finding my cement-covered car and the security footage that followed. The prosecutor played the video for the court. Gasps echoed through the room as the jury watched Margaret directing the vandalism with obvious pleasure. And what was the value of the vehicle? The prosecutor asked. $32,700, I replied. It was only 8 months old. And why do you believe you were targeted? Initially for questioning HOA policies, but the footage clearly shows Mrs. Wilson discovering my sheriff's department credentials in the vehicle and appearing pleased about it. Margaret's attorney tried to paint the incident as a neighborhood prank gone wrong during cross-examination. His suggestion that I'd somehow provoked the response brought objections from the prosecutor and a warning from the judge. After 3 days of testimony, including financial experts detailing Margaret's embezzlement scheme, the jury deliberated for just 2 hours. We find the defendant guilty on all counts, the jury foreman announced. Margaret's composure finally cracked. She turned to glare at me as if I were somehow responsible for her actions. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, Judge Harmon didn't hide his disgust. "Mrs. Wilson, your actions represent an extraordinary abuse of power," he stated. "You used your position to intimidate, harass, and ultimately commit felony vandalism against a law enforcement officer. Additionally, you betrayed the trust of your entire community by embezzling nearly $100,000. Margaret stared straight ahead, lips pressed thin. "I sentence you to 18 months in state prison for the felony vandalism and embezzlement charges. Additionally, you will pay full restitution to the HOA fund and to Deputy Taylor for the destroyed vehicle. Upon release, you will serve 500 hours of community service and be prohibited from serving in any HOA or community leadership position for life." The gavel's sharp crack echoed through the courtroom. As officers led Margaret away, she finally looked defeated. Her kingdom had crumbled completely. Outside the courthouse, reporters thrust microphones toward me. "How do you feel about the verdict?" a young journalist asked. "Justice isn't about revenge," I replied. "It's about accountability and making things right. Today isn't just about my car, it's about restoring a community that had been bullied for years." As cameras flashed, I noticed my neighbors standing together behind me, nodding in agreement. For the first time since moving to Oak Ridge Estates, I felt like I was truly home. 6 months after Margaret's sentencing, Oak Ridge Estates had transformed. The new HOA board, elected in a record turnout community vote, had systematically dismantled Margaret's Byzantine rules and replaced them with common-sense guidelines. My driveway, once the scene of a cement disaster, now held a brand-new SUV, courtesy of the insurance settlement and Margaret's court-ordered restitution. The vehicle sported a custom license plate that read, "Cement," my small way of owning the story that had changed everything. Today marked a special occasion, our first annual Oak Ridge Community Picnic. The event would have been impossible under Margaret's regime, which had prohibited unsanctioned gatherings of more than 8 residents in common areas. I arrived early to help set up tables in the community park. Mrs. Peterson was arranging flowers while Mr. Patterson fired up the massive grill he'd previously kept hidden in his garage. Outdoor cooking equipment over 24 inches had been against Margaret's rules. Deputy Taylor, called Samantha Lopez our new HOA chairperson. Unlike Margaret, she worked full-time as a school teacher and approached community leadership as a service, not a power trip. "We have a surprise for you." She guided me to a table where a strange object sat covered by a sheet. With a flourish, she pulled it away to reveal what looked like a modern art sculpture. "Is that?" I started, leaning closer. "A piece of your car," Mr. Patterson explained proudly. "When they were jackhammering the cement off what was left of your vehicle, I asked if I could keep a chunk. Got it mounted on this base." The sculpture featured a cement-encased piece of my former car's hood, complete with paint still visible beneath the gray material. A small plaque read, "Freedom from Tyranny, Oak Ridge Estates remembers." "We thought it could serve as a reminder," Mrs. Peterson said, "both of what happened and to ensure nothing like it happens again." I was speechless. What had begun as a personal violation had become a community's turning point. As residents arrived for the picnic, many stopped to examine the sculpture and share their stories. The tension that had permeated the neighborhood under Margaret's rule had dissipated, replaced by genuine connections between neighbors who'd previously been afraid to interact. "Have you heard about Margaret?" asked Mr. Collins, handing me a soda. "Not recently," I admitted. Margaret's downfall had been satisfying, but I'd moved on. "She's doing her community service over at Riverdale Park," he said. "Picking up trash in an orange vest. Barbara says she looks miserable." I nodded, feeling no particular joy at the image. "And how is Barbara doing?" "Better," he sighed. "The counseling is helping her understand how she got swept up in Margaret's schemes. She's hoping to move back home eventually." The picnic bloomed into a genuine celebration. Children played freely on lawns that once couldn't have toys visible after 5 p.m. Dogs ran without the previous size restrictions. 3 families had painted their houses colors that would have earned hefty fines 6 months ago. As evening approached, someone suggested taking a community photo. As we gathered together, I found myself surrounded by people who had transformed from intimidated residents to friends and neighbors. "Hey everyone," called Samantha, raising her glass. To Deputy Taylor, who taught us all that sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when they come with clipboards and rulebooks. Laughter and cheers erupted across the park. As the sun set over Oak Ridge Estates, I realized that sometimes, a disaster, even one made of cement, can be the foundation for something better. 1 year after the cement incident, I stood in my driveway washing my SUV with the cement license plate that had become something of a local legend. Kids from neighboring communities would sometimes ride by just to see it and hear the story. A familiar county vehicle pulled up, and I recognized Officer Rodriguez, who'd been first on the scene that fateful morning. "Thought you'd want to know," he said, leaning out his window. "Margaret was released yesterday. Served 15 months with good behavior." I nodded, feeling surprisingly neutral. "Any idea what she'll do now?" "Moving to Arizona, apparently. Her sister lives there." He shrugged. "Doubt she'll be joining any HOAs soon." After Rodriguez left, I walked through my neighborhood. Children played on front lawns. Mr. Patterson was installing a fountain that would have given Margaret a conniption. Mrs. Peterson's wildflower garden bloomed with colors never permitted under the old regime. My phone buzzed with a message from Samantha. "HOA meeting tonight, just quarterly updates and pizza. No clipboard required." The cement sculpture still stood in our community park, but now it was surrounded by new benches and playground equipment funded by the recovered embezzlement money. Most newcomers to the neighborhood didn't even know the full story, they just appreciated the reasonable HOA fees and friendly atmosphere. That evening, as neighbors gathered casually in the community center, laughing and sharing stories, I realized something profound. Margaret had tried to bury me in cement, but instead, she had laid the foundation for something better than any of us could have imagined. A true community. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishment, it's about rebuilding something stronger from the rubble. Or in my case, from the cement.